Stories have a power to them, especially God's stories. They're my favorite stories because they have the power to change lives. And the one who's pointed to behind the stories can change their hearts. I always marvel at the infinitely creative ways God reaches people. Usually it involves the word and the spirit, but everybody's story is different and unique. And that's what I love about covering these kind of stories.
Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. I've said many times on this show, everybody has their own story. I've traveled millions of miles around the world, met thousands of people, and it's amazing how many people have a magnificent, unique story to tell. I have with me a man today. His name is Mark Ellis, and he is a man who recognizes just that fact. As a matter of fact, he has spent the last 20 years documenting that fact. So please welcome a journalist, the founder of God's Report, which is a global platform highlighting ministries and ministers around the world, and the author of When Kingdom Lights Shine. Please welcome Mr. Mark Ellis. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl. It's great to be here. I'm the founder of GodReports.com, and the book is When Kingdom Light Shines, which is a collection of my favorite stories that I've collected over the last 25 years, interviewing some very inspiring people.
So you must have traveled quite extensively through the world to gather up these kinds of stories and these people. But before we get into that, I'd like you to, I'd always think it's better for people to relate more to people that they know a little bit more about who they are as a person. So would you mind just telling us a bit, Mark, about who's Mark? Who was Marky when you were growing up? Who's Mark?
Well, I have to say I had a fairly privileged youth. I mean, I don't have a hard story to tell of deprivation. My father was very successful in business, and I ended up at UC Berkeley as a student. My parents were somewhat naive, I think, in sending me there, not knowing all that might be in store for someone who was a little bit sheltered. But I was lost. I grew up as a very nominal believer, having attended sporadically mainline denominational church. Can't remember ever really hearing the gospel message. A friend, when I was 18, took me to hear a traveling evangelist. And when I heard him speak, I could tell he was telling the truth and that Jesus really is the savior of the world. But I was not ready at 18 years old to make him the Lord of my life.
Sorry.
That would take me another 11 years of living for myself, first as a student at Berkeley and experimenting and drinking deeply of the world in that environment, and then graduating, going into real estate in my 20s, and moving to Orange County, which is a very different environment than Berkeley, as you can imagine. But I was pursuing, mainly I was worshiping that unholy triumvirate, me, myself, and I, and doing a pretty good job of it. But toward the end of my 29th year, I was getting tired of living for self. And I started attending a singles Bible study, not because I was really pursuing God, but I was more interested in pursuing young women who might be a little bit higher quality than what I might meet in a bar. And so I was at one of those studies. I heard a guy mention a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. And that name just kind of stuck in my head. And I was out driving around one day in the business for real estate. I saw a Christian bookstore. I went in there and I bought that book. I read it alone, and it was two chapters grabbed me. One was how the Bible was put together, because I wondered, could I really rely on this, the underlying documents and manuscripts? And the second was the chapter on the resurrection, because I reasoned that if Jesus really rose from the dead, that set him apart from Muhammad and Buddha and all of these other religious figures. And when I finished that chapter, I felt the evidence was compelling. I got down on my knees, said the sinner's prayer that was at the end of the book, and my life really changed from that day forward.
Well, that's quite a story. It's not too different than I've heard many times from many people. And of course, there's variances to it, but it's kind of amazing that we walk along this world. We think we learn things as young men full of vim and vigor, and we go out into the world like bulls to take on the world. And then suddenly this light, this spark goes on somewhere in our head and miraculously goes from our mind to our heart. And we open it up and we find Jesus has been there all the time. And it's kind of an amazing journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
So many of us have traveled that.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. So then you committed yourself, obviously, into doing God's work and documenting ministries and stories and things. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I stayed in the business world for a number of years. And then the church we were attending, started to get more involved. I became an elder there, and we were actually without a pastor for 3 years. And the elders of the church had to step up, and we actually had a rotating pulpit with various speakers. I was invited to preach once, and one thing led to another. And the company I was working with was sold, and I answered a call into Christian ministry and became an assistant pastor at this small church in Laguna Beach. I was there for 9 years. It was a part-time position, and because it was part-time, I started looking for something else to supplement my ministry, and I always had nurtured a love of writing. And so I started writing stories for a British journalist named Dan Wooding, who started Assist News. And the very first assignment I had was covering Promise Keepers at the LA Coliseum in 1999. And through Dan, I met some very inspiring people and started contributing to his news service. And then later I caught the vision for God Reports, which is a little bit more mission oriented as a Christian news site.
So how do you decide which of the missions and ministries that you want to highlight on God Report?
It's kind of amazing. I mean, initially stories were assigned to me, like covering Promise Keepers, but sometimes one story will lead to another story. Just in your own private personal life, God drops things in your lap that are very interesting people that you run into. So I'm on a lot of email lists and get interested in books people have written, like yourself. So it's kind of amazing how those things happen. But I have had the opportunity to meet and interview many inspiring people.
It never ceases to amaze me how often the world goes around in these marvelous ways and people connect. There used to be this game that people played 3 degrees away from some actor's name. I forget what it was. And somehow, you go through life and all that silliness is there, but you find little places in time when it's a reality. You were in the real estate business. I had a lot to do in the real estate business in my younger life, very involved. Nationally, and a lot of different things. I ran a number. I was a real estate broker. I had a mortgage company, and I had a company that served the real estate industry. I'm sure you used one of my products in your lifetime and didn't realize it. I'm the guy who created transactionally funded errors and omission insurance for realtors. And I brought a home warranty company across the nation. So did a lot of those things. And at the same time, God was in the back of my ear, do something meaningful, do something meaningful. So I do understand what you mean. You open yourself up and you let, some people say it's coincidence. There's no coincidence. Things get moved in God's time to where he wants it to be.
That's right. That's right.
So tell us about, you've had 2 decades, 20 years in doing this. What are some of the stories that stick close to your mind and your heart that you want to repeat, Tim, about people and events?
One of my favorite stories was interviewing Stanley Praimnath, who is thought of as the only known survivor from the impact zone on 9/11.
Yeah.
Because he ran all of Fuji Bank's operations on the 81st floor in Tower 2, the second building to be hit. And Stanley was an immigrant who worked hard and rose to become VP and head of that entire floor, which covered a whole acre of space in Tower 2. And on the morning of 9/11, he was in his office. He didn't know the first building was hit. It was a soundproof building, and all of a sudden he started getting all these phone calls. Stan, are you okay? Are you okay? And he's wondering what in the heck is going on. And he looked out his window and he saw huge chunks of fiery debris falling from the first building that was hit. And so he was quite alarmed. He got in the elevator, went downstairs, was prepared to evacuate. And someone came on the loudspeaker saying, building Tower 2 is okay. Go back to your offices. Everything is okay. So he turned around, went back up to his office. He was standing there talking to a family member on the phone, looking out toward the Statue of Liberty. And he saw a plane, a jet, flying straight toward his office, eye-level contact. And it was United Flight 175. And as that plane got closer to his office, he could actually hear the engines revving through that soundproof building. He said, I'll never forget that sound. And Stanley was one of the few Christians who happened to work for Fuji Bank. Every day at lunch, he'd sit at his desk, read his Bible, eat a soup or a salad. So his Bible was sitting on top of his desk. When he saw the plane was about to hit, he dove under his desk and said, Lord, I can't do this. You take over. And if you've seen the replays of when the second building hits, it's coming in, straight, but right before it hits the building, the wing tips up like this. And the underside of that wing sliced right through the top of his office before the whole thing, of course, exploded in a massive fireball. And it's a bit like the story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the Bible as to how he escaped this fireball. And he believes the Lord protected his desk. He says, because I had my Bible on top, but I think it was also his prayers and God's protection, like the fourth man in the fire, that Stanley was able to escape. I won't give all the details. I won't spoil the book for your readers, but it's quite amazing how he was able to crawl out. And there was another man who helped him, a man named Brian Clark, who's also a hero in the story. And when they finally got out and they ran to the old church,
Trinity Church. Yeah.
Trinity Church.
Yeah.
Stanley's holding on to the iron fence outside the Liberty Church when that building came down, and he was engulfed in a smoke cloud and lost Brian Clark, the man who helped him escape. So it's quite a story. One of my favorites.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's just sinking into me. I've heard many stories about 9/11. I knew quite a few people that didn't make it out of those buildings. And it never ceases to amaze me how God's hand moves.
Yes.
Never. I hear stories from men who have survived battle scenes and other people who've survived airplane crashes and all kinds of things. And with the grace of God, you say to yourself, how? How? And you just have to let it go and say, he knows how. It's his merciful hand. That's it.
Yes.
Nothing else you could say about that.
I was also privileged to know the last living D-Day chaplain at that point, Lieutenant Colonel George Russell Barber, who happened to live in Orange County. Mm-hmm. And he was a very inspiring man, larger than life in some respects. I ended up inviting him to speak at our two sons' Eagle Scout ceremonies. Both of our sons became Eagle Scouts, and he gave an inspiring talk. But on the Sunday before D-Day, he was holding services on 11 ships in Weymouth Harbor in England for thousands of young men who were there, and he was giving away pocket Gideon Bibles. And on the day of the attack of D-Day, he led his men off the Higgins boat. When the ramp came down, someone got off that boat first, and he had no weapons on him to protect himself, but he led the men off, and the boat right next to them, just like their boat, blew up. And so the first thing, he gets off the boat, he's cradling men in his arms who are dying, and reciting to them from John 14, "Do not let your hearts be troubled," the Jesus words. "Trust in God, trust also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions." And he talks about going ahead to prepare a place for them. So if you've seen Saving Private Ryan, that's a pretty good depiction of the intensity of that battle scene.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to imagine being there at all, but to come off with no weapons, no physical weapons. He said, "I had no physical weapons, but I had the sword of the Spirit."
Right.
And he could not get over the cliffs.
He was prepared.
Yes. Yeah. He had his armor on.
Had his armor on.
Spiritual armor.
Right.
But he said he couldn't get over the cliffs, so he had to dig a foxhole in the sand. He spent the night in that foxhole watching tracer bullets going overhead all night. And then the next day he got to the top, and he met the famous war correspondent, Ernie Pyle.
Oh.
And he and Pyle walked the beach together. And Pyle wrote a very moving account of what they saw in the sand. And at one point, Pyle bent over to pick up one of those pocket Gideon Bibles that had somehow detached from a fallen soldier. And Pyle wrote, "I wasn't sure why I stopped to pick it up." And he carried it for a while, and he said, "I wasn't sure why I laid it back down." But there was a story told in all of the debris that was along that tide mark that was quite a moving story. And then later, there's a great story about Colonel Barber climbing the highest mountain in Germany, and what he sees in a storm when he gets to the top. I won't spoil the book, but that was another story and an individual that really inspired me.
So this book that we're talking about is When Kingdom's Light Shines.
When kingdom, singular, when kingdom light shines.
Okay.
Yes.
So, folks, you can get it at Amazon, I'm sure.
Right,
and
like everything.
And like everything else. And in the show notes after the show, you will find all the contact information where you can get a hold of Mark, see his websites, connect with all of what he's involved in, and probably look into all of the Christian publications where he's featured in so many of them. And you'll be a way to write to him and communicate. But it'll all be in the show notes. Just click and it'll go through. And hopefully, Mark will be providing us with some photographs and videos to include in the show a little later on that will show you some of the things that represent some of the experiences in his life as well. So tell us more about what you're doing now and what you hope to do in the treatment show.
Well, I'm still collecting stories. We have 1,400 testimonies on the God Reports website. And all of those testimonies link to a page that presents the gospel. And we have about 20 to 30 people a month receiving Christ through those testimonies, which is encouraging to me. Stories have a power to them, and especially God's stories. They're my favorite stories because they have the power to change lives. And the one who's pointed to behind the stories can change their hearts. And I always marvel at the infinitely creative ways God reaches people. And usually it involves the Word and the Spirit, but everybody's story is different and unique. And that's what I love about covering these kind of stories.
And we have mentioned a couple of times here, folks, stories that related to military people and experiences, to tragic experiences. But these kinds of things happen in the everyday life of everyday people. They're not necessarily traumatic, but God has a way of moving in everyone's life. And I'm sure you have stories like that you can tell about the average American housewife or just the John Doe who goes to work every day to provide for his family, and God moved in his life.
Yeah, I mean, we cover stories of very ordinary people and very extraordinary people. So everyone from an astronaut on the moon who had an encounter with Jesus to just the average person who's out there serving God or seeking God in their own quiet way.
Yeah. So many people are involved with speaking the gospel. People get involved as preachers, or they get involved in support teams or things. I know a man who was a musician, and he was a heroin addict, and he died from an overdose and was brought back, and because of the love of another musician who was a Christian, he was brought to Christ, and he has an entirely different life now. For 30 years, he's been doing missionary work and performing for the Lord. He's a very interesting guy. He takes old rock and roll music and put the doo-wop music, and he puts Christian lyrics to it. And he's been in the most remarkable places. He's in L.A. very often. He's in L.A. this week, as a matter of fact. But he's been in prisons and various other institutions where, hardened criminals are brought to tears because of the Word of God. And he reaches them in a way that seems a little offhand to some people, but they say music has what is the power to soothe the savage breast, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Why not bring the Word of God as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Martin Luther turned some of the popular bar tunes that people would sing into hymns. So he started that. I love that idea.
To me, it's wonderful. I love it. So you have two boys, and you're married. And tell us a little bit about your life.
Well, my wife is a famous artist. She's one of the top pastel artists in the country, if not the world. She paints under her maiden name, Sally Strand. So I married up, you might say, above my pay grade.
So did I.
And she's not only talented, she's beautiful. So I'm a very blessed man. And we just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. And we're going to do a
Fantastic.
cruise here coming up to celebrate that.
Where are you going on the cruise?
From Lisbon to London.
Wonderful.
With Hillsdale College organized the
yes. Yes, I got an invitation for that cruise. I participate with Hillsdale also, yeah.
Yeah, we're fans of Hillsdale, and they have a little different approach to education, as you know.
Yes.
A little more conservative, traditional, don't take government money.
Right.
And there's a big demand for their approach. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing here shortly.
Oh, God bless you. That's wonderful. So we're coming down to just around 25, 26 minutes. There's a couple of things we're going to do to add videos and photos to here, but I want to give you a few minutes to say whatever you like. The floor is yours. Tell the people anything you'd like to say, any events or any invitations that you have for them, and then we'll do something else.
Yeah, I hope people will be inspired by the book. I've had 2 atheists read it, and one was a neighbor I gave the book to, and he showed up at my door with a list of questions about Jesus. So that led to a very interesting discussion. He's not in the faith yet, but I feel like the book stirred him in a way that will lead to faith. And so I see the book not only inspiring believers, but also maybe igniting faith in those who feel like they're being drawn in that direction. So I've had people giving away multiple copies to friends and family because I think there is a power to these stories. And it's not like reading theology. They're bite-sized stories that you can read 1 or 2, before you hit the hay at night.
Right.
And I had one woman I ran into at a checkout line. She got the book right before she left on a cruise for New Zealand. And she said she read this one story about near-death experiences, a guy who saw heaven. And she said, she told her husband, I'm going to sleep so peacefully tonight. And so the book really had an impact on her.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Because all of these stories that you have, I know that you have a platform for the missionaries and the ministries to speak about, but have you thought about doing a platform or a podcast introducing some of these people and these stories? And you do what I'm doing right now, host people to tell their story?
Well, my son has turned some of these interviews into podcasts.
Oh.
So he takes my old recordings and then uploads them into the podcast form. Then he puts them on YouTube. And so I'm very happy about that. We have recorded a couple video interviews like you're doing with, I just recorded the owner of a Christian coffee shop who owns 4 coffee shops in our area, telling his story about how he views his ministry, his coffee business as a ministry. So I think more and more will be borrowing from your inspiration and recording the interviews and turning them into podcasts.
I would encourage you to do it because you're a comfortable speaker. You have great experiences and great stories to tell about wonderful people. I can only tell you, I started this. Well, I retired for my 3rd and final time 5 years ago when I was 78 years old. And I said, I don't play golf and I can't go fishing anymore. So what am I going to do with my life? My wife said, write a book. So I wrote a book, and the book became an Amazon bestseller. And from that book, I spoke to many people about their stories. And that was the impetus that encouraged me to start this podcast. Mm-hmm. My book is called To Every Page a Turning, and it's just that. Your life is like pages of a book, and you turn from one experience to the next, and people you meet and the things you experience. And so it gave me an inspiration to start a show like this. And I can't tell you how many people it touches, because we can think that we can do all kinds of wonderful things, and yet there are some people you're never going to reach But if they're relaxed in their own home or in their car and they're watching or listening to this, and somebody else, one of you guys says just one thing that sets a spark, so you can ask for, and the rest is up to God, and he makes it work, I like to tell people all the time, it's like coming across a stagnant pond, and you throw a pebble in the center. It makes ring on ring on ring, and you never know where it's going to go. So nothing is wasted in life. Nothing.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So
well,
good.
I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for being on the show today. I encourage you to spend a little more time talking with some about doing the podcast. My producer is available to you. I'm sure you might, if you don't know Mike, you should have your girl get together with him and talk about it. He does a wonderful job. I don't do any of this stuff. I just talk to people, and he massages it all, makes it look good, So I'd encourage you to do that because I'm about to say something that applies to you also. I say to people all the time, everybody has their own story. And you, audience out there, you have your own story, every one of you. And no one can tell it like you can. Write it down. Tell it to your loved ones. Tell it to the people you know. Send it to a newspaper. Even Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post now. They're printing things they never would have done 10 years ago. Go out and spread the news. Because when it's too late, it's too late. And all that wisdom is gone. And the world needs your wisdom. We desperately need that wisdom. Share it with others. So that's what I'm going to tell you. And that's what I tell people on this show all the time. You're also going to have to endure one more thing, Mark. One more thing. Because I'd say this every time I'm on the show. What do I know? I'm this big blustery guy from Brooklyn. I don't know much of anything. But I know one thing. Get someone you know today, grab them in a big bear hug, and tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. It may be the only time they hear those words. And I'm quite sure God loves them also. And he loves you, and he loves Mark, and he loves me. What else could we ask for, folks?
Yes.
Have a happy life. Mark, you know what I'm going to say to you now, right? I love you, man. God bless.
So good. I feel it, and I pass it back and want to pass it to others.
Thank you so much. That's what life is about. Pass it on. Make that pebble work in the middle of the pond.
Yes.
God bless.
Well, bless
Bye-bye,
you.
guys. See you next time.